Hi everyone, I'm Federico Boccardo and welcome to the Event Horizon lessons, how to create in 72 hours a serious game that hits the mark. This is the first video of a series that shows you how we created a serious game about the coronavirus during an internal game jam done in remote. In these lessons, I'll show you at 360 degrees how we created the game, explaining the choices, the techniques, the workflow, the errors, and the tips and tricks of making a good game in such a small amount of time. I hope you enjoyed this development journey. I give you useful information in order to become better at making games, not only at the jams, but also at your daily job. Let's start. First of all, I want to show you the final result of the 72 hours. The game is called Locked. It's a serious game that raises awareness on the coronavirus and on the preventive actions to apply during the quarantine period. The player has to make choices to control the people's actions. Each action affects some stats, and the stats affect the coronavirus diffusion. The objective of the player is to finish the quarantine period with a growth factor of the virus lower than the target value. The game is very accessible and usable for a game jam project. It offers also variety because every match is randomly generated and it has a lot of other cool stuff that I'm going to explain to you during the lessons. I previously defined Locked as a hit-the-mark game because the most important Italian websites wrote articles about it and the game was played by 1,000 of people. Before we start to dig into the development process, I want to quickly introduce myself and the other two jammers so you can associate this voice to a face. I'm Federico Boccardo, I'm the game designer at iBag Studio and I also do other work as a freelancer. I started making games in 2014 and I have experience in a lot of different fields, from PC games for hardcore players to gamification and educational projects for kids. I have an IT diploma that taught me how to code and how to approach logical problem solving. Then I left the IT route and I approached game design, taking a course at Event Horizon. These are my released games. I worked in game design, level design, programming and QA. Okay, let's talk about the other jammers. Alessio Cusano is a computer science graduated programmer and Nicholas Mihawk is a sound designer with an IT background. We worked together since 2015 and we made a lot of projects and game jams. So we are very connected and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses. In this first lesson, I want to teach you the art of asking questions, a very underrated argument because it's considered trivial, but it's the basic ingredient of each choice during the development and even before. If you're not well prepared with the right questions, making a good game is very difficult. The idea of making a game jam about the coronavirus came out based on some triggers. At the time, we had been in quarantine for 2 weeks and the boredom was starting to increase. Second, our partners told us that our projects were currently in pause for the quarantine lockdown, so we were without a project to do. And the last one was the disinformation around us that led to psychological terrorism in Italy. We hate it. With these triggers very clearly in mind, we started to ask ourselves questions in order to define our objectives. It is very important because they are the pillars that allow you to make clever choices. Without them, you start to make irrational decisions that go against your game. So the objectives act like lights that light up your path in order to create a good game. Our first objective was obviously the sensibilization. We want to fight the disinformation, so the player has to learn thanks to the choices in the game. Second, very important, is to create a product that is not disrespectful for the people who lost a relative. So we completely avoid ironical games about the virus. The third was accessibility. We wanted to create an intuitive and simple game playable also by a non-gamer mom. The next one is experimentation. We work a lot on B2B projects in which you cannot make errors. So the game jams are the perfect safe zone in which you can try and learn new tools and techniques without the weight of the bad consequences. The last one was do not crunch, but spoiler, we crunched. So, as you can see, even before the start of the jam, we ask a lot of questions in order to have a very clear idea of our objectives and the direction to take. Without them, you lose a lot of time and you have the feeling of uncertainty during all the jam, and this will be very perceivable in your final product. Okay, let's start with the first phase of the jam, the brainstorming. I want to list you the most useful tips and tricks that we used. They are based on our experience and they are not the classical ones that you could find online. First of all, harmony. Creating and maintaining it is essential. It sounds like a trivial thing, it is not. To create harmony, you have to connect with people before the brainstorming phase. You have to do informal things like dinner together, take a coffee, talk about hobbies and stuff like that. You feel when there is harmony in the team, everyone is enjoying the others, and the feeling of I'm scared to speak about me and my ideas is totally absent. Harmony is the secret ingredient to brainstorm fast and in a constructive way, having fun. The second one is don't rush it. It is better to spend a lot of time exploring ideas and asking the right questions until you find the right direction, compared to pitch only 2 or 3 ideas and start the development without a clear vision because you feel the time ticking. Our brainstorming, for example, took 4 hours, but in my last global game jam, we brainstormed for 6 hours because we were struggling to find the right project that matches our objectives since there were also strangers in the team. The third one is a known concept for designers, but everyone has to use it. It's very useful to pitch experiences and feelings instead of mechanics, interactions, genres, and very restrictive things. You have to explore, so experiences are the best way to do it because they give you a clear directions without creating constraints. When you have pitched interesting experiences, you can start to think about the mechanics and systems that better communicate them to the player. Our initial experiences were the power of control, choices weight, anxiety, a feeling of urgency, and virus behavior depends on you. The fourth one is very linked to the previous one. Use visual triggers to stimulate your creativity and to trigger ideas. I saw a lot of people at the game jam sat in a circle with a white paper that struggles in order to find ideas and also to communicate them to the other team members. Use Pinterest or similar sites in order to receive a lot of inputs and to communicate what you mean. The rule show, don't tell works very well here. For example, we use the Tao image to represent our experience choices weight because we explain very rapidly the concept. In a good choice, there is something bad and vice versa. So everyone in 1 second learned what I was trying to say and the concept was printed in their mind. The last one is to avoid the fixation. This word means when you are stuck on an idea and you push to do it. Or you pitch other things but around the previous idea. The solution is to force yourself to pitch totally different ideas compared to the previous one. If you apply these tips and tricks, I guarantee you that your brainstorming sessions will become very productive and you'll explore incredible ideas. At the end of our brainstorming, we came out with a bunch of ideas. I'll show you the most interesting ones and I explained to you the method we use in order to evaluate them and decide what was the right game to do. The first one was a strategic game in which there is a 3D model of the Earth. Each turn some cards are spawned and the player has to place them in the various countries in order to apply effects. The objective is to reduce the virus contagion. The references were Plague Inc. for the virus diffusion and Islanders for the positioning of the elements. The method we use to understand very clearly if a project is the right one or not is to put it under our lens of the objectives that we decided before the game jam. So again, you have to ask yourself a lot of questions to be sure of your decisions. For example, this game works well for the sensibilization, to take seriously the theme and experimentation, but is not very accessible because there are a lot of systems. And the major problem is that this project is too big and complex to do, so we discarded it. The second one was a first-person game in which the player has to do standard activities during the quarantine, but in the environment and around him there are bad situations that increase the virus diffusion, so he has to fix them. The references were first-person narrative games like The Way of Life and This Dragon Cancer. It was in scope with all of our objectives except the difficulty. The 3D war, it would be a nightmare for us, so we decided to discard also this project. The third one was our final choice. It was born like a Reigns-like, in which each card is a person who puts you in front of a meaningful situation, and the player has to swipe left or right in order to make a choice and solve the situation in a certain way. So the focus is learning useful information during the match and use the knowledge to make the right choices. The references were obviously Reigns for the gameplay and Black Mirror only for the anxiety-inducing feeling to create in the player. This game was totally in scope with our objective, so we chose it. At this point, you have to apply one of the most important techniques. All the team members must have what I call the designer vision, so a complete vision of the project and not focusing only on their fields, because with little time available, it's essential to keep in mind what is the game experience, what are the core features, how you imagine your game complete, what are the valuable things that the player perceives, and so on. Because if everyone is concentrated only in his role, at the point in which elements are combined, problems arise because everyone is imagining a different game in his head. So keep the communication constant, use references and play the game together every 3 or 4 hours and discuss it. This first introductive lessons is finished. We learned the importance of asking questions, and I showed you how we applied this technique for the first phases of the game jam. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the creation of a solid game backbone. So we'll dig into the game design process, in how to create a strong game personality, in the study of the formulas used to create a credible coronavirus behavior, and in the importance of the task management. See you in the next lesson.